Welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
Your glance at sex, society, and culture.
With Jesse and PJ Sage. Hello everyone, we're really excited to be back for our second episode of the Peep Show podcast. We have some really great guests today. We'll be talking to Maggie McMuffin about Hugh Hefner's death, Dahlia Dee about being naked on the internet, and Sunny Moraine about writing sex. So let's get right to it.
For our new segment today, we're going to do something a bit different. Hugh Hefner, founder of Playboy magazine, died last week at the age of 91. Discussions of Hefner and Playboy's legacy have been polarizing, but we thought Maggie McMuffin's essay for Tits and Sass stood out as both nuanced and witty, so we invited her to chat with us.
Maggie is a sex worker and performer based out of Seattle, Washington. She's known for being a sex clown, having a handsome cat, and getting kicked off a JetBlue flight over a pair of shorts in 2016. Welcome to the show, Maggie. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we really liked your article because instead of choosing sides, you seem to be arguing that both the good and the bad of Hugh Hefner and his empire can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I was initially, I had just gotten out of a rehearsal and one of the castmates was like, you guys, Hugh Hefner died. Mm-hmm. And I felt something and I wasn't sure what it was. And the only thing I could think was, I am really looking forward to seeing the warring essays tomorrow morning about whether or not he was great or terrible.
Right.
Well, you called it.
And it just got me thinking more about my conflicting feelings with him because I do believe that he was an abusive man. I think that how he treated the women in his life and that he treated his partners, it was reprehensible, and we should not praise him for how he actually lived his lifestyle. But at the same time, to say that Playboy did not affect our culture, that it didn't affect pop culture, that it didn't affect politics, that it really didn't affect sexual politics is just completely wrong. And I think that people should be allowed to cherish that and be able to cherish your creations.
Yeah, I think nobody is going to say that he didn't affect culture, but a lot of people would make the argument that Playboy and its empire was wholly negative on the culture, right? And so I think what you're saying is there was actually a lot of positive effects, even if he didn't set out for those to be the effects of his empire.
Exactly. I think that he really was just I want to start this porn magazine full of ladies that I find attractive and kind of illustrate this lifestyle that he dreamed of, because he was married with a kid when he started the magazine. He wasn't the swinging bachelor with a harem full of blondes that we pictured him being for decades. But I think that Playboy the magazine did a lot to showcase ideas and give voice to people who were not popular in the early years of the magazine. I saw a lot of discussion after the article was posted about how Hugh Hefner really did do a lot to say, hey, racial equality, that's kind of an amazing thing. Did he in his life always do that? I think that that's up for debate. I mean, if you look at the women that he treasured, the women that he was putting in his magazine and the sort of women that he was being photographed with, it's clear that his view of feminine beauty and what he cherished was still a very narrow Eurocentric beauty.
Right.
But at the same time, his magazine was doing a lot to say, hey, let's interview Malcolm X, who to this day is a very polarizing figure in civil rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my article glossed over that because I really didn't know as much about it when I was writing the article. But what I did know about was the economic realities of sex work, that sex work is an industry that is stigmatized and criminalized partially because it's an industry where marginalized groups, especially women, are able to really make a profit on their own terms. And it really is kind of a middle finger to a lot of oppressive structures in our society. And the Playboy clubs allowed women in the 1960s to make more money than they could have in other jobs.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually something that's not recognized in discussions of sex work in general, not just in regards to Hugh Hefner and Playboy, but at large.
And also, I think this clubs themselves probably are one of the under-discussed aspects of his legacy, because in addition to interviewing people like Malcolm X, he also pushed for those clubs to be integrated in the civil rights era, even buying back some from franchisees in order to make them racially integrated.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that the Playboy clubs were very controlling of the bunnies. I mean, strip clubs to this day are known for committing massive labor rights violations for
Right.
misclassifying dancers. But it's not like day-to-day jobs are better. It's not like baristas at Starbucks aren't going to get sexually harassed by bosses or by customers. It's not like they aren't working under physically strenuous conditions.
Right.
But the thing about sex work and with working in the Playboy clubs, just as working in strip clubs with less savory managers today, is at least people are saying, you know what, if I'm going to be mistreated, I'm going to be mistreated in a place where I feel like I have more control over my earnings and where I feel like I'm being compensated more for the bullshit that I'm putting up with.
Right, right. I think that's a really good point.
One of the critiques of Playboy and Hefner's legacy is that it was really a cis male heterosexual fantasy. And even for, cis het males, it was a very narrow vision of what sexuality and beauty looked like.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, in your piece and in many of the tweets and other things I've read that have come out in the wake of Hefner's death, a lot of women came out saying, actually, Playboy and the fact that it was in my house when I was a young person or was accessible to me and an accessible part of the culture helped me to realize my own sexuality in a way that other things hadn't.
Yeah, I also saw that from a lot of people, and it wasn't surprising. Women's queerness is an interesting thing in our society because it's not seen as filthy like male homosexuality or queerness,
right?
But it's also more fetishized, and women are also seen as inherently less sexual.
Right.
That's why women can have really close friendships sometimes that are like, oh, of course it's platonic. It's just gals being pals.
Right. That's seen as like not threatening from the perspective of like male partners in a way that wouldn't be the case if it was the other way around.
Exactly. So I think that there's the ability, especially since in my early 20s, I was doing cabaret and burlesque performance. So it was like, oh, I'm just looking at pinups because it's research.
Right.
Bought my first Playboy when I was 18. My birthday is right before Christmas, so that meant that the entire family went with me to get this Playboy.
Oh, wow.
Because everyone was there for the holiday.
Wow.
And they were like, shouldn't you be getting Playgirl instead? And I was like, oh no, the articles aren't as good. I've heard. I think. Well, don't you want to be looking at the men? It's like, I don't like men with muscles. It's like, but you like men, right? Yeah, sure. I mean, there's guys in here somewhere. There's pictures of them in suits. It's really the suits. The suits are what I'm into. And these were also lies that I was telling myself because I didn't admit that I was queer until I was like 21 or 22.
Yeah.
So Playboy also enabled me to like stay in the closet for myself. Like, oh no, I just like their hair. Look how pretty the hair is. And I want to be a model maybe. So I should really go over these poses and how bodies look in certain angles.
Something that stood out and resonated with me was talking about this sort of confusion as a young person, especially as a young, like, queer woman of, do I want to be with these people or do I want to be these people? And those almost being like one and the same thing, right?
I'm pretty sure you'd said in the article, I chose both.
And now I do. Now I make porn with other attractive femmes who I'll look at and be like, God, you look really nice today. I want to wear an outfit like yours. But first, I'm going to take your outfit off in front of this camera.
Right. That seems like a great compromise. So in what ways do you think that Hugh Hefner positively impacted our culture or even just possibilities for women?
Sorry, this is a really complicated issue.
Yeah.
I had one friend say when I was discussing with them that they thought that Hugh Hefner made it more accessible to be a sexually empowered woman.
Mm-hmm.
That he kind of made it possible for women to be slutty who wanted to be slutty.
Right. Yeah.
Which, I mean, and there is something to be said about, well, it also meant that there was more of a demand for women to be slutty, and so is the patriarchy.
Right.
just brainwashing you, and are you doing this to appear more attractive to men? But I don't always think that's the case, and I think that that is also a very black and white way of looking at this.
Yeah, I think that's a very black and white way of looking at this too, and one that actually works to undercut like the voices of women who are speaking for themselves, right? When they say like, actually, I get a lot out of this work, or I feel empowered, you know, it undermines what they're saying to then say, oh, except that you've been brainwashed to think that.
Also, I think it diminishes the voices of queer women and queer femmes who, even outside of being able to profit off of an image of promiscuity, they're like, I'm not attracted to men.
Yeah.
There is no reason for me to be doing this for men. I am really only doing this because I like my body, because I like feeling hypersexual, because I like showing off my skin, because it's freaking hot in the summer and I don't want to wear pants.
Right.
So
yeah. Yeah, that there's a whole bunch of different ways in which women from different positions like relate to the images.
Exactly. And there were plenty of queer women in sex work in the 1960s who were doing it because they're like, this is a job that I like. This is a job that I'm good at. This is a job that I can profit off of. If I have to cater to the male gaze to do that, like, I'd have to be in the closet at any of my other jobs anyway.
You know, from the perspective of the 90s and the 2000s, sexual norms, Playboy seems quaint. But at the time it came out in the 50s, it was rather radical. And in order for it to be accepted, Hefner did a really interesting thing, which was to try to package it alongside all sorts of other aspects of life, whether it was like consumer culture and like different lifestyle commodities and also art.
Yeah, but not just life, though, like a very masculine-centered
and a very middle class.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Idea.
And aggressively so, right? Like,
yeah,
in fact,
like this
it was
is what it means to be a gentleman.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was selling a very narrow view, but nevertheless, it was doing something different rather than just sort of compartmentalizing porn or nudity in the sort of red light district of adult entertainment. It tried to cross the boundary and create a product in which
like sexuality was integrated with other sorts of aspects of life.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Sexuality is an aspect. It's not the core thing. Like, you can be a fully rounded human with other interests going on and be interested in sex. It's not this deviant interest that overtakes everything.
Right. And even if that was the primary thing being marketed or the standout thing about Playboy, I think the idea that it wasn't disconnected from those other things in the magazine meant that people could have Playboy in their home and not be stigmatized as perverts or something. And that kind of reconnecting sexuality to the rest of life, even if it's a very narrow view of sexuality and a very narrow view of life, you know, was a pretty significant move in terms of overcoming a lot of the shame and stigma that surrounds sexuality in our culture, and did particularly in like the 1950s.
I think that's true. I was in middle school when I started seeing people wearing Playboy stuff and learning what it was. I think I was like in 8th grade in my freshman year when the first 3 seasons of Girls Next Door with Holly, Kendra, and Bridget were on.
Right.
And so Playboy was not as taboo. It was just this cultural thing. You know, it's just a throwback to the 60s. It was a more wholesome time. It was cleaner. It was brighter.
Yeah.
Like men were gentlemen and these women were ladies. Like, look, they're naked, but they're not fully naked. Their vaginas are covered up.
Yeah. Right.
So even though it was porn, it was really accessible, sort of acceptable porn.
Right.
And it was very interesting to me. Like, looking back, my mother's boyfriend had an office which, like, I wasn't technically supposed to go into, but he had like 2-foot high stacks of Playboys just sitting along the wall, and I could just go there and like thumb through them.
Right.
And he thought it was okay to just leave them out.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point about all of this. Playboy was a porn that was acceptable, It's fairly tame as porn goes, but the fact that there's any porn that's acceptable at all and accessible because it's so acceptable, I think also opens the doors for like destigmatization of other types of porn as well. I suppose you could also make the argument that like he normalized what is okay and then what's not okay, and the things that are outside of that are not okay.
I can't defend photoshopping labia.
Yeah.
Which Playboy did a lot.
Right.
So.
Yeah, which is arguably a form of body shaming.
Right.
Or at least in its consequences.
It's definitely a form of body shaming, and it flies in the face of what we've been talking about, it's destigmatizing things, it's making things better, but it's also saying only these bodies are acceptable.
Right.
The photoshopping amazes me because Playboy already had like a really rigid list of qualifications to be one of their models.
Right.
And they were still like, you aren't good enough.
Yeah, and I think that points to some of the like very negative aspects of Playboy and Hugh Hefner and the entire industry that surrounded that.
Yeah, I mean, that's establishing like a very, very narrow standard of beauty, which I think is one of the major criticisms of Playboy.
Yeah.
And it's empowering a certain kind of woman, but it's also telling those women, you will never be good enough. You are never going to be perfect.
Right, yeah.
Like, your tits can always be bigger, your hair can be blonder, your smile can be whiter, your vagina can be tidier.
Right.
So...
Yeah, so what is your like main takeaway from this, or what are your feelings after having written the article and then also had conversations with people about it in the wake of that?
The more conversations that I have about this, the more complicated it becomes in my head.
Yeah.
And so all I can think is that we have to look at things separately. We also have to look at the fact that Playboy the magazine and Playboy the empire was not just Hugh Hefner.
Yeah.
Hugh Hefner did not actually interview Malcolm X. Someone who he hired who was actually a journalist did.
Right.
It was other novelists who were writing the fiction materials that excerpts were pulled from. It's artists who were making the cartoons. It's women who were modeling and probably doing a lot of the work to make those models look as pretty as they did.
Right.
There's thousands of people who made Playboy what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, because Hugh Hefner kicked it off with a backing from his mother, which I think means that he can't be qualified as a self-made man if you're borrowing money from mommy.
Good point.
So I think that it's okay for us to love Playboy and to love what it did because it wasn't just Hef. Right. It wasn't just Hugh Hefner. It was lots and lots of people who, unfortunately, their names are never going to be remembered.
Right. All right. Do we have any other further questions? Anything else you want
to... You ended your essay saying that perhaps the best thing Hefner left us is a cautionary tale of ally worship. And I think that that's actually a really important part of the conversation. Just people talking about what it means to be an ally, what it means to be a good ally, a bad ally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, I see that in activist work and marginalized communities that I'm a member of, where usually because people are allies and we're like, allies are really important. You can't really push a movement forward without allies, which on some levels is true, but we can't center allies and cater to any toxic behaviors that they have.
Right.
Right. And or in the case of Hefner, despite what maybe he accomplished, or more importantly, what the thing he created accomplished, that toxicity, that abusiveness, that problematic behavior also is going to be like a really central part of his legacy.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to talk about him in the future without talking about him raping women and giving them a curfew and not letting them leave the house.
Yeah, and I think it's very possible, and I think this is what you opened up in your article, to say, like, Hugh Hefner, the man, is not somebody that we should be valorizing as, like, a hero in any way, but that we don't need to then throw out all of the effects of everything that he started.
And we can also look at what Hefner did and go, okay, it's not the 1950s anymore. We can allow someone other than a middle-class white dude to do these things now, and we should.
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty.
All right. Is there anything that you are working on that you want to plug or anything?
I just launched a Patreon today, jumping in on that wonder of the 21st century.
Awesome. So how do people find your Patreon?
It's just patreon.com/Maggie McMuffin. And they can also follow me on Instagram if they're interested in seeing pictures of my exploits and also my adorable cat.
Perfect. All right. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
We wanted to spend some time thinking about sex and the sharing and selling of images on the web. So who better to talk to than 6-year veteran of online sex work industry, Dahlia Dee. She's a model, a cam girl, a web producer, and a professional dom. So Dahlia, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Anytime. I'm really excited to talk about this with you guys.
Great. We are too.
All right. So how about telling us a bit about deciding to make adult content for the web, and if you were open about it or tried to keep it a secret when you started?
When I very first started, I tried to keep it a secret. That lasted all of a week.
Oh my gosh, that was fast.
Yeah.
What happened after a week?
This industry is kind of a catch-22. So in order to be successful, you have to be super visible. But in order to be super visible, you're kind of risking, your whole family and whoever finding out.
Right.
So I had initially tried to keep everything from my family, but obviously that didn't quite work out. Because, you're trying to promote yourself and you're trying to get as wide of an audience as possible so you have as many clients as possible and therefore more money.
Right.
So it's only natural that somebody that knows you is going to see it. And that's why I always tell every new model, everybody who's considering getting into this industry, if you are concerned about anybody in your life finding out about this, do not do it because you will be found. It doesn't matter if you don't show your face. It doesn't matter if, you wear a mask. Somebody's going to find out that it's you and you will be exposed.
You think even the people who try that hard to hide their identity with masks and not showing their faces are found out as well?
Unless you were camming from a sterile white room and have no identifying markers on your body, no moles that can be identified, no tattoos, and you never show your face, then, maybe you have a shot of keeping anonymous, but at that point you're not going to be as successful.
Also, I was just thinking about that. If you were to create an environment that was that sterile, you also wouldn't be able to attract anybody because you wouldn't have a personality that would attract clients.
Exactly. And I have been in this industry for quite some time, and I've seen people try it. They have the cute little masquerade masks and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they're just not as popular as the girls that are willing to show their face, because half of this job and half of the reason that our clients love us so much is because they have that personal connection with us.
Right.
And can't do that with somebody that's not showing their face. It's detached. It's almost creepy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's actually really interesting, too, because the way that a lot of critics of sex work, whether it's SWERFs or religious conservatives, talk about this kind of work is as if it's people selling their bodies. Right. And I hear you saying that it's not enough to expose your body. In fact, that's not what people are really after. That such a huge part of it is the human interaction element.
Absolutely. We're not just selling our bodies, because people come back to us every day,
right,
wanting to just talk, right? They tip us just to chat or just sit there and look at our face,
right.
Yeah,
and I think that they're that also points to the sort of digitally mediated aspect of camming, right? So because there actually isn't any physical interaction, there needs to be something else that's offered instead of physical interaction.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, when camming first became a thing through Yahoo Messenger and MSN and all that, that, it would have sufficed to not show your face. But like I said, there's so many girls out there that are actually, engaging with their audiences and showing their faces that you would just get lost in a sea of people that are doing more than what you're doing.
So another thing to talk about are the risks, though. I've certainly heard of people who've been denied banking opportunities because their identity has been connected to sex work. Or
actually cammers from Canada who have been having a really hard time getting into the United States for cam conventions, things like that.
There's so many things that this job can affect. So like you mentioned, yes, there's been a lot of us that have been having a hard time getting into the States because of this new law where at the border they can go through your social media and they can go through your laptop and they can go through your phone and they can look at everything. So unless you delete every trace of your camming, which is, you know, so difficult to do if you want to keep any of your content or anything like that, they'll turn you away at the border. So that is a consideration. The banking was another one. I'm permanently banned from PayPal, so is everybody else in my house, because we share the same address. They just like nuked us. Jeez. Everyone with the same address, everyone with the same last name, everyone connected with me in any way. They all got banned from PayPal permanently.
Wow.
Yeah. Banks won't recognize our income as, you know, a steady income or as legitimate income. So you qualify for loans.
So that impacts like buying a house and...
Exactly. So I actually know personally, cam model on MFC, my free cams.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She actually recently was condo shopping. And even though she had pretty much all of the money in cash to pay for the condo completely, like all, you know, $350,000 in cash right there, they would not sell it to her because she admitted to them that she was a cam girl and that's how she made her money. She was refused by, I think, like 3 different places before she actually found one where she lied on her application and then they took her money. So
wow.
long reaching issues with this job. I mean, yes, it's great money and it's a lot of fun. And if you want to get internet famous, by all means, but there's definitely things to consider before you sign up for this kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Not even to mention, you know, the stigma of people that you know finding out, which is another huge issue, which is how conversation started to begin with.
Yeah, tell me about like how you've experienced that.
For me, it's been pretty lax just because I am so confident about it. And I always, like when I first was found out, one of my ex-boyfriends actually caught one of my shows on Chatterbait and took a bunch of screenshots and sent them to my mother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
I was outed in the most ridiculous, obnoxious way possible.
And your mother probably didn't want that either.
Right? She was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw that. Like, you know, I haven't seen you naked since you were a baby and I wanted to keep it that way.
Jesus.
Yeah. So that was really embarrassing. But once, you know, we got over that and we had, you know, the talk of like her making sure that I'm being safe and all that, she has come to an acceptance. She's not in agreement with it, but she's definitely come to an acceptance. And, you know, having the support of my mom as much as I can kind of made me more confident because she was the one that I was the most scared about finding out. And that, ironically, she was the first person to find out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me personally, I haven't really experienced all that much. I'll have people that would, you know, message me. A lot of my family has kind of disowned me, but I didn't really care about them anyway. But, you know, I'll have people, you know, on my personal profiles and stuff like that that'll message me being like, oh, you know, we went to high school together and I just saw you, you know, sucking dick on Pornhub. And it's awkward for sure. And you get a lot of people that are like, oh, you know, you filthy whore and all this stuff, despite the fact that I've been in a committed relationship for upwards of 2 years.
Yeah, right.
You know, so you get that quite a bit. But again, it's just part of this job. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to accept.
Yeah. So how, speaking of like your high school friends finding your stuff on Pornhubs, like what has your experience been of your content ending up on those sorts of hubs and what are your feelings about it?
So when I first started, I was exclusively pay to play. All of my video content was behind a paywall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had to pay a certain amount for each video or for a membership or what have you. And as with pretty much everyone that gets any sort of notoriety in this industry, it got stolen.
Right.
People would buy it and then post it on tube sites. And, you know, 90% of my time became submitting DMCA takedown requests.
Right. Yeah. And for those in the audience who don't know what that is, you want to explain a little bit about that?
Oh, DMCA, it's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Basically, it's just a legal tool that allows you to ask that content you own be removed from a site that's hosting it.
Right. For me personally, the solution to that was to spend less time trying to get that taken down.
Yeah.
And more time, A, making sure that if some of my stuff got stolen, that it would be very recognizable so that people would be able to find me. And B, if you can't beat them, join them. So I have begun creating content for porn sites. I'm currently on Pornhub, X videos, YouPorn, RedTube,
Wow.
UJIT,
Yeah.
all over the place. And it's so much more empowering now because if somebody steals one of my videos, I can just take it under my own name. I just message the owners of the site. I say, hey, this is my video. This is me in it. If you could just transfer the earnings from that video to my account, that'd be great. And then I'm actually
And does that happen? Do they do that?
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that. That's interesting.
And that's a great feature. Can you talk a bit about how you monetize that content exactly and where that money is coming from?
Yeah, so most tube sites have adopted a YouTube-style amateur program where you get paid for each view. So the better your content does, the more money you make.
Right.
So I've kind of shifted my focus from making, paywall content to creating content that will get a lot of views. And I find that the secondhand revenue from that is also pretty significant as well. When you have 300,000-400,000 people that are watching your video, a good portion of those are bound to look for the ones that do cost money, or, they'll follow you on Twitter and then find that you have Snapchat for sale or join cam shows.
Right.
I can't even count the number of people, on Chatterbait or Streamate who have messaged me like, oh my God, I've watched all of your porn. I'm your biggest fan.
Wow.
So yeah, so it does translate into earnings. It's just a little bit of a workaround, and it's a way of sort of owning that piracy, because it's a fact of life when you're a cam model. When you make good content, people are going to steal it because people suck.
Right. So then, the strategy that you've come to is you can't stop that. The DMCA takedowns is just a headache that doesn't work out in your favor anyway. So it makes more sense for you just to put as much content as you can out there on the tube sites anyway, and then monetize that.
Yeah, and then when I do create content that is, pay-per-view or whatever, I always be sure to put a very prominent watermark, either one that links back to my Twitter, like something that's at, XO Dahlia Dee, that's my Twitter and stuff, or, something just says my name on it, so that if somebody was to steal it, it would be no issue for me to transfer that under my name and sort of reclaim it. And then once I find out that that's happened, I take it off of, the pay-per-view sites. I just put it on all the tube sites, and then I'm still making money off of it, even though people aren't paying for each purchase of it.
Right. They aren't buying it, but you're still getting money from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think it's still possible to fight against the flow of piracy and keep your videos behind paywalls on, one or two sites?
Would I say that it's possible to do that? Maybe. If you have a very small fan base and only sell videos to people that you implicitly trust. But is it possible as a cam girl? No. I honestly don't think it is. Every time you sign on with a cam site, for example, Streamate, Chatterbait, MyFreeCams, any of those sites, one of the terms in their contract is that they own everything that you do.
Right.
So, they record all of their streams, or, they record good streams or things that they deem worthy of reposting. They will post you wherever they want to on tube sites. Streamate even has its own tube site.
Yeah.
They take, recorded gold shows and they post them. That's one of the things that you're agreeing to by signing up for cam sites. So, is it possible to completely avoid piracy? Absolutely not. Again, it's that catch-22 where, the more popular you get, the more likely it is that people are going to do this to you.
Right.
And the more you try to avoid it, the worse your career becomes. And it's just such a waste of energy to spend all of that time trying to get everything taken down when you could be profiting off of it, really.
Right. Yeah. The thing that I think is interesting about listening to you talk about this is it becomes very clear that this is a profession for you that, is a full-time job that you put a ton of time and energy into. But I don't think it's that, it's not necessarily that way for everybody. I think there are some people who come in and out of it, some people who do it for a variety of different reasons. And it seems to me like the way that you go about it maybe would suggest that the way that things are set up now with piracy and things like that, that it's a field for professionals. What do you think of that?
Maybe not so much a field for professionals. You know, I myself have come in and out of the job. I've gotten part-time jobs when I get bored of camming or when it gets slow.
Right.
It's not so much that it's a job for professionals, but it comes down to the basic, if you don't want your stuff to be exposed, this is not the job for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's just an inevitability.
Yeah.
So, I mean, professional or not, if I was to sign on and make 3 videos in my entire lifetime, odds are at some point those 3 videos are going to get posted on Pornhub.
Right.
Whether they're great, whether they're, amateur quality, whether they're professional, it doesn't matter. It happens to everybody.
Right.
So
I'm thinking that for like generations, for people who are growing up now, who've grown up with iPhones and who, for part of their like dating life from the time that they're like teenagers, like, sexting and exchanging of like sexual content and pictures is just integrated into their relationships.
Yeah.
There's going to be a shift in attitude about what having like pictures of yourself naked on the internet or anywhere means.
Like, I personally, like you said, I do devote a lot of time into this. This is my life. And I really haven't gotten that much negative feedback from people, my own age, even a little older or a little younger.
Right.
It's kind of just like a thing. They're like, oh, you get naked on the internet. That's pretty cool. Where
Right.
the vast majority of the people that have an issue with it are like my mom's age, my grandma's age, like 50, 60 plus.
Right.
So the stigma itself is definitely dwindling. I don't think people think it's as much of an issue.
Right.
What it comes down to in that case is like what needs to change is the laws regarding internet piracy.
Yeah.
If this is something that's going to be changed and fixed where, not everybody's stuff gets stolen, then it's the laws that need to change. They need to make it more strict for repercussions for websites that won't take down your content when you request it.
Right.
So, and, is that going to happen anytime soon? Maybe. There's been a lot of progress with this whole like revenge porn thing over the last little while.
Right.
Because you don't have to be a cam girl or a sex worker to have your nudes on the internet.
Right. That's what I was kind of trying to get at with like relationship sexting,
Yeah.
which is not professional at all. It's just part of dating.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, like all these people are walking around with phones now. We all have these little personal computers in our pocket.
Right.
Inevitably, millions of us are going to be taking a bunch of naked pictures of ourselves
Right.
and sending them to people we like. It's just, hey, I think you're cool. I want a picture of my boobs. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
yeah, so that definitely, and like, again, the revenge porn things come in where, people can always take your content and post it on the internet. And once it's out there, it's so hard to take it down. Whether you're losing money from it, whether you're, embarrassed because you don't want people to see you naked.
Yeah.
Anytime that you take a photo of yourself like that and send it to somebody or a video or whatever, it's out there.
Right.
Yeah, our friend Maggie Mayhem likes to say that sex workers are canaries in the coal mine for a lot of social issues. And it seems like this is one of those cases where, like, this issue of cam piracy and how weak the enforcement is around where your content gets posted and how limited your ability is to have it taken down does seem to, like, really speak to this broader issue of revenge porn or non-consensual pornography, and how, like, while that's like an issue of livelihood and like day-to-day problem for sex workers, it still can turn a non-sex worker
World upside down.
world upside down
Yeah.
if they get caught up in the same thing. And it's actually arguably the same weak laws, that because we're like so focused on like copyright rather than just being like, it's my body, I should get to decide where it gets posted.
Absolutely. And I think the only way to solve that for good is to essentially make it so that our bodies are copyrighted by ourselves.
Yeah.
Anything that's taken by me, or, if somebody takes a picture of me, it should be mine.
Right.
Until I decide otherwise. If
I
I decide
absolutely agree with that.
Whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Like that should be the default, and then unless you have like a contract or something.
Absolutely. And, you know, in situations where people are using those images and videos for good, there will be a contract involved.
Right.
You know, if I want to post your photo on, say, you know, wherever, my Facebook or something like that, I should by default have to make sure I have your permission.
Right.
Now, I mean, that doesn't quite help with, you know, I send a picture to my boyfriend and he shows all the guys at work. That doesn't really make a difference. But when it comes to posting on sites, absolutely, we should all have 100% copyright over our bodies. But that's in a perfect world.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and it still might make a big difference in those like really awful cases where it's not just like showing a bunch of people at work, which is bad enough, but like spreading pictures that you sent in confidence all over the web. At least like those kind of laws would help in those really severe situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, and if that was the case, if our bodies were by default copyrighted by ourselves, then we wouldn't have those issues. You know, you find something of yourself that's posted somewhere, you send them a takedown notice, and, you know, the consequences would have to be severe enough that if they didn't take it down immediately, then they would get in huge trouble.
Yeah.
The laws regarding that kind of stuff are getting better. Look at, you know, Rob Kardashian recently. I don't know if you guys follow any of that stuff. Like him posting pictures of his ex and stuff like that. Did he face any repercussions for that? No. But it started a conversation.
Right. There was definitely a lot of outrage.
Yeah. So if it can happen to somebody that famous, perhaps that will start the conversation that leads in the right direction. But, I mean, as somebody who monetizes their content, the only way to get around it is to own it. And unfortunately, people that don't monetize their content and are literally just embarrassed to have their content out there, there's no options for them, really.
Yeah, I think that the way that you're talking about that is really interesting. Would you say that the way in which you've kind of taken that back or taken power back to that has been empowering to you? Or how would you describe that?
Oh, absolutely. Because at this point, like when I first found out that people were stealing my videos, I was devastated.
Yeah.
It's really upsetting feeling to put that much work into something only to have it stolen and posted for free where other people are profiting from it.
Right.
So to take that back and to put the money back into my pocket, and, you know, all it has done is expanded my social media and like my personal brand hundreds of times over. Because, you know, instead of trying to get it taken down and getting it removed, I've exposed it to hundreds of thousands of times more people than I ever would have if I had kept all of my stuff behind a paywall.
Yeah.
So kind of owning it has pretty much helped me in ways that I never really thought that it would when I first started doing it.
Yeah.
But I was just wasting so much of my time being upset about it that now it's like a weight's lifted off my shoulders. Because if somebody steals something, I'm like, cool, guess this video is going free. Like, you know, and I still make money from it, so I'm not too concerned.
Do you think maybe by doing all of that, you're actually making it easier on people who do, as part of their relationships, exchange nude or sexual photos, and especially for those people who maybe have their content stolen and posted? Sorry,
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like,
I think, are you asking, do you think that her and the other people who are doing this sort of work are like paving the way for changing attitudes in the culture?
Yeah, that's what I think. That the fact that
I tried to translate.
I know that's much more articulate.
Yes and no. I think yes, because at this point, like when I first started camming, I knew nobody else that did it. And then now it's like everyone and their brother is a cam model. Like, so many
There's a lot
people are doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely grown. Our community has definitely grown. And there's definitely, because of that, you know, each of us has like this pond ripple of people that we know. And the more of us that get into camming, the more people are going to be accepting of it.
Right.
Because they all know somebody who's doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would definitely be changing the stigma and making it less difficult for people to get into camming and to be okay with that. But I don't think that takes away from the embarrassment of having your naked photos posted on the internet if you're not somebody who is a cam model.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I don't think it would ease the sting.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, right, I mean, psychologically, that's
Yeah.
it's having your consent violated, I think, is always going to be like really awful.
Right.
But
yeah, and it's like, if two people in your entire life have ever seen you naked, and all of a sudden, you have this photo of yourself on the internet that you sent to somebody in confidence, and thousands of people can see it, it doesn't make it any better that other people have done it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, that's
it's
exactly
not,
right.
Oh, well, that's okay because everybody's doing it.
Right.
It's like, oh my God, this sucks.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart response, and I totally agree. I'm just wondering, too, though, maybe if it's making our reaction to that a little less victim-blamey, or to not just assume that, well, if you get, naked on the internet, then everything's your fault, and you
Right.
deserve anything that happens to you, even if you're just sharing it with one other person.
I mean, because that's actually the attitude that we hear so much of. Like, I've spoken with other people who teach at college who say, oh, I tell all of my classes that they would be very stupid to send pictures to anybody. And I'm like, wait, like, that's the message that we're giving people, is that if somebody violates your consent or your trust, that it's your fault because that was stupid. Like, I think that's really terrible advice.
Your fault. I wouldn't blame the person that took the photo, but I don't think people put enough weight on the fact that their stuff can be shared so easily.
Yeah.
It takes 5 seconds to upload something to social media.
Right.
So I don't think enough people bear that in mind when they send, naked photos and sexting and all that stuff.
Right.
So maybe not victim blaming so much as people just really need to be more aware of the implications of having their stuff posted and how easy it is to post that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, whoever's posting it in the first place is obviously a super shitty person to begin with. So
Right.
It's akin to you don't want to be victim blaming when it comes to rape culture either. But at the same time, we as women do take precautions, even though we shouldn't have to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So it all just comes down to, we need to be careful and they need to stop doing it.
Yeah.
That is probably a good note to end on. Do you have any other final things that you'd like to say?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit. I'm stoked to have been able to kind of share my viewpoint because I know you guys kind of had a different one going in. So.
Oh, no, it's great to talk to you, though, and hear where you're coming from. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Just my social media. I'm always willing to have more followers and people talking to me. So if anybody's listening to this, you should definitely follow me on Twitter or Instagram. They're both at Dahlia Dee.
All right. Thank you so much. We really
thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. Hopefully we'll talk again sometime soon.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you. We have Sunny Moraine. Sunny Moraine is a writer of both erotic and non-erotic science fiction and fantasy, and has published stories in places like Clark's World, Uncanny Magazine, and Tor.com. They also have a queer horror drama podcast called Gone. So, welcome to the show, Sunny.
Hi.
Thanks for
Good to be
coming
here.
on. First, tell us a little bit about your work.
Well, I mean, you kind of mentioned I write both erotic and non-erotic fiction. I actually got my start writing erotica, which I think is kind of funny. And it's something that I haven't stopped doing. It's not something that I graduated from. I go back to it now and then. And I mean, it's still every bit as much fun as it was when I started out. And I still think that it's an incredibly valuable form of writing.
When did you start writing?
Oh, God. I mean, that's kind of an interesting question because I consider that I got my start writing as a fan fiction writer, which means it was about, it was about 15 years ago now.
What was your first fan fiction?
I don't want to talk about it. I think it might have been the X-Files. And I mean, fan fiction is fan fiction, so it's not all sex, but there's a lot of sex. And that's kind of where I learned how to write sex. Straight and queer sex. I kind of branched out to a lot of different stuff.
And I mean, if you're going to write about sex, like, X-Files is a good place to start.
Well, hell yeah. Yeah, lots of possibilities there. Yeah, and I started writing professionally, I think, it was almost 10 years ago, I think now. It's been a long time.
Wow, that's great. So tell us what you're doing now.
I'm doing a bunch of different things. I've got a short story coming out in Uncanny, which there is sex in that. I use the word pussy, which a lot of my friends have a lot of discomfort with, and which I've come to like a good deal.
Tell us about that.
It's weird because mostly the erotica I write right now is still fan fiction, and that's where I try out a lot of ideas, a lot of kinks that I'm thinking about working with, just a lot of themes, and I kind of see what works and what doesn't, and then I might take that into pro fiction or not, as it seems called for. But one of the nicest things anybody has ever said about my writing is that mine is the most beautiful prose that they've ever encountered that makes liberal use of the word cunt. I love using that word. I love just using it. I love writing prose that I think is really beautiful, but also is almost crude, just in the way that it's really blunt in terms of the words it uses. But I decided I want to try and get comfortable with pussy, even though I thought it was a silly, weird word with bad mouthfeel.
And that's harder for you than the word cunt.
That was my question.
No, it was much harder for me to get behind. I don't know why. There's just, cunt is really kind of an aggressive word. And pussy feels more like a kind of it feels more like it's silly in kind of a bad porn way, not a good porn way.
Huh, that's really interesting.
I started writing from the perspective of a female character and started thinking about her relationship with her body and her sexuality and the terms she might use to think about it. And I don't know why, but that's what kicked me into feeling comfortable using pussy, and I use it all the time now.
Do you feel like there's something political about using that?
Maybe. I haven't really thought about it in those terms too much, although I think that how we write about sex, regardless of whether or not it's speculative fiction, I mean, I think writing erotica is inherently a political thing. I think it's got to be, because sex is political. And obviously that means how you write erotica is also political. I think it says something that it took writing from a female character's perspective. And it's not that I don't do that all the time. It was something about this character. I think that it took that to get me behind it says something about the politics of that word. And I'm not entirely even sure how to articulate them, but my sense is that, yes, there is something there.
It also seems to say something about the politics of erotica itself, too, right? Like, it seems like maybe part of the power of erotica then is that ability to empathize with the sexuality of others, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I'm really interested in this idea of, like, writing from the perspective of differently bodied and differently sexed people. Like, how has that been? Besides just using different language.
That's a really interesting question, especially given that some of the very first erotica that I was writing of any kind was really between two men. So when I was first kind of investigating my sexual imagination in a creative aspect, women really were not so much a part of it. And that was... I don't really know why that was. I identify as non-binary, so I've started kind of thinking about if that might have been me in a really, really premature way starting to work through my own gender identity. I have no idea. But trying to write from the perspective of somebody with a dick is, I don't know that I do it well, because I have no personal experience to, measure it against, so to speak. But I've never found it difficult, and I think that might just be because I think I have a pretty good imagination, but I've always felt like I could move very fluidly back and forth. I haven't written so much from the perspective of trans people, which is something I'd like to try to do more of. But yeah, I've never had a hard time with it.
Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot, actually. I was looking at the anthology, The Flesh Made Word. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then I'll circle back to how I think it relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great anthology. That was thrown together by my friend Bernie, and I loved the concept, which is, let's actually take the act of writing, whatever that ends up meaning for you, and let's make that sexual in some respect. And one of the things that came out of that I found so fascinating, just reading these other authors and their takes on it, was their approach to how there is something embodied about writing. Because there's something embodied about imagination and emotion. When you're writing from the perspective of somebody who has a body, you can't not be thinking about your own body.
Sure.
And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. There's writing as a physical act. There's writing on somebody's body, which was kind of what my story was about. There's the intimacy of writing through a thing. I think A.C. Wise, I think her story actually is about utensils for writing. It's actually about the tools of writing and sexual connections to the stories told through those tools. And I just thought it's one of the things I love about speculative fiction for erotica. It allows you to make use of scenarios and ideas that non-speculative fiction just can't touch at all.
Yeah, I have more of a background in theory and less of a background in fiction, but I was thinking, as I was looking at that, of Helene Sixu, who talked about writing through the flesh, and she said something that really resonated with me in one of her essays, where she said that women who are never far from mother always write in white ink. And that always stood out to me. Well, what does that mean? Obviously, she's referring to milk and that very a very maternal relationship to her own body. But then writing also can be seen as a giving birth. So that's which actually I think is very erotic as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since I've read that, I've been thinking about what does it mean to write in this very embodied way. And so I was interested in when you were talking earlier about switching bodies and how that might change the way in which we write and the words that we use and all of that.
Yeah, it's something that I've noticed. There is a really noticeable difference, not all the time, but a lot of the time, between erotica / some people would categorize it as porn. I don't like making a hard distinction between those two things. I think it's all pretty much the same thing. But explicitly sexual fiction written by cisgender men as opposed to written by everybody who doesn't identify as a cisgender man. And one of the things I personally have noticed is that there is a shortage of empathy in the former, and there is much more of a sense of moving into the perspective of not just the point of view character, but the feelings and the thoughts of both of the or more of the people who are involved. And I don't think you have to do that to be really sexy, but I think that the sexy stuff that I've written does that. It's about empathy. It's not just about bodies.
So what you're describing there, it sounds like it's as much an issue of social position and privilege as much as we're talking about the way that bodies shape how we write. Yeah,
it's something I've never really talked to cisgender men who write erotica. I have a few friends who do, and I know personally Vinny Tesla, as far as I know, he identifies as a cisgender man, and he writes some wonderful stuff. It's not just hot, it's really funny. He's got a wonderful sense of humor. But I haven't really talked to him about what it is like to write from that perspective and to try to mentally embody other kinds of bodies. And it would be interesting to discuss that with him. I'm actually not sure why I haven't talked to him about that.
Yeah.
That would be fascinating, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So speaking of Vinny Tesla, I believe that one of your other picks was his book, The Ontological Engine. So why don't you tell us a bit about why you chose that?
It is erotic steampunk, basically. And there is... Again, it's not just that it's very sex positive. One of the things I love about Circlet stuff is that all of it's sex positive, even the stuff that's kind of darker in tone. But there is a kind of a joyful aspect in his writing that I really enjoy. It's he has another story called Oda Discovers Fire, which is kind of similar. It's sex as... ontological engine is sex as kind of a mad science thing. It's steampunk, and there's also kind of a mad scientist component to it, which is very funny. Mm-hmm. But he also writes in a way that I think is really compelling and a lot of fun about relationships and power dynamics between two characters who want to fuck each other and want to have a really good time while they do it. There's kind of a little bit of a wrestling match, if I'm recalling correctly, in Oda Discovers Fire. And it's two people kind of figuring out how their sexual dynamic works in a way that's really playful. And playfulness is something that I don't think I see enough in erotica. Funny erotica, there just isn't, I think, personally enough of.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and perhaps that says something more to the seriousness with which sexuality is often taken up in our society.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite sex scenes that I've written recently It's actually fan fiction. Features a lot of laughter. And when I was writing it, I was enjoying that aspect of it and thinking about how, there's sex is kind of play in some respects, in some ways in which people do it together. And there is something I think kind of political about reaching for that, because you're right, sex is over serious, I think, in a lot of the ways in which we talk and write about it. And reclaiming that, I think, it's really worth doing, and you can do it in writing in a way that you can't in any other way.
Yeah, I think like the joyfulness of it and the fun.
I think also vulnerability, right? Like the ability to laugh. It implies, I think, in a lot of cases, especially when we're talking about being embodied and all of the silly things that happen with our body in sex, and there's a certain amount of vulnerability, but like being open to being vulnerable to somebody else, which is itself actually, being secure in your relationship with someone else, I think, is almost like the precondition, I think, in a lot of cases for that laughter. Because, laughter occurs maybe in lieu of embarrassment in a lot of cases.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it does. And there's something almost orgasmic about laughter, in fact. I mean, it's kind of involuntary. It's gripping your muscles. It feels really good.
Right.
Yeah.
You might not be able to control it for a while. And I think those two go together well.
And it's like a release afterwards, too.
Yeah, that's the orgasmic part about it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's that kind of Freudian
laughing
motion
and having
of
orgasms
like,
and sneezing. They all like
like you have this tension that builds, and then there's this release, and you feel like a calm afterwards,
Right.
Yeah,
that's great. So there's one final collection that we wanted to talk about. It's this fantastic erotica, and I believe that's sort of the best of from Circlet Press. So maybe talk a little bit about that, and more broadly about why you think that Circlet is a good choice for people looking to get into speculative fiction erotica.
Yeah, I sent you guys that particularly because it is a best of, and it showcases. One of the things I said that's so great about Circlet is that they showcase a lot of really diverse voices and perspectives and way of approaching erotica, and a best of is going to have the best of all of those voices. One of the things I love about that collection in particular, although Circlet has a number of best ofs, they've been around they're actually celebrating their 25th anniversary right now. They've got a Kickstarter going for that, to do an anthology for that. Just wanted to plug that real quick. But that collection just features what I don't remember exactly which stories are in it, but I do remember combing through it and going, okay, yeah, I know this writer. This really is a lot of the best of what they have, and because of that, it is. I'm trying to think of the different stories that are in it. There are so many different ways of doing it, and some of them are kind of lighthearted and funny, like Vinny's, and some of them, mine's a kind of a downer. I have a story in there that's called Catch and Release. It's basically like it's a guy in space who discovers what is essentially an alien genie, and she has various kinds of sex with him and kind of connects him to himself in a way that he hadn't been able to do in a very long time. And if I recall correctly, she kills him at the end in a very in like a super consensual way, but. I wrote it a long time ago, but
so
as if he had reached like the apex of his existence, and after those experiences and was done, or
that was the release.
Yeah, kind of. Writing about sex and death together is something I really like doing. It's a theme that I. Vinny writes about fun and I write about death, so we've both got that going on. But yeah, there are so many stories in that collection from many years of this press's operation that I think are worth looking at. It also got a lot of really good reviews, so when people ask for something, it's one of the ones that I kind of push at them.
Well, it sounds like that would be a great place for readers to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
We appreciate you joining us, and it was great talking to you, and you'll have to come back and introduce us to some more erotic fiction sometime soon.
Yeah, I would love to. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the time and energy of all of our lovely guests. You can find Maggie McMuffin on Twitter at Maggie McMuff and at Patreon. You can find Dahlia Dee on Twitter and Instagram at XODahliaD, and you can find Sunny Moraine on Twitter at Dynamic Symmetry. I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at Sapiotextual.
I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me at PeachSage.
We also have a Patreon where you can hear sneak peeks and extended interviews. If you like what we're doing, we would love your support. Special thanks to our 2 supporters, Princess Burple and Maria Santiago. 2 supporters for 2 episodes seems all right with us. If we could pick up at least 1 for every episode, that would be awesome. Thanks to Joe Kennedy for the music. The show was produced by PJ Sage. Signing off. Have a great week.